What's up, folks? I'm Chris, your NFL writer here at Occupy Fantasy, here with a look at the Week 1 main slate of the NFL season here on FanDuel and DraftKings, which I'll be using to look through most of the data available here today. Week 1 is a 13-game slate to kick off the season with a bang, and it is a doozy. Early in the season here, we're not going to have as much trends data to rely on to make decisions for our lineups, so this is very much the most volatile time of the NFL season, but we still have a tried and true method for evaluating the strongest spots on the board to consider for your plays. So we're going to go through that here. Our normal agenda for this video is to go through betting market data, talk about the running backs that are most likely to be in the best game script environments because of what we can learn from betting market information. We'll go through the highest totals, some team total leaders, favorite plays at each position really briefly, some game stack ideas. Here for Week 1, we're going to take a look at what previously has won some of these largest Week 1 tournaments. Specifically here on DraftKings, we have the $5 entry fee, $1 million to first place lottery that DraftKings has done for 3 years now. This year will be the 4th time that they have offered that contest. So we're going to see what we can learn from the first 3 years of winners and hopefully be able to use that to decode a formula to try to win here in 2023. Week 1 of the NFL season, you see Lamar Jackson up on the screen. And the biggest reason that I have him up here is that he is one of the highest ranked quarterbacks in the Occupy model, which makes a ton of sense when we see that Baltimore is the biggest favorite on the slate this weekend against the Houston Texans. Baltimore getting 10 points here on DraftKings Sportsbook in a relatively modest total, 44-point total game right now. The next biggest favorite on the board here in Week 1 is going to be the Washington Commanders. The Washington Commanders have a 7.5-point spread in their favor here at DraftKings Sportsbook, and that is largely because the Arizona Cardinals are widely considered to be one of the worst teams in the league right now, and they will be going with Joshua Dobbs starting on the road on the East Coast here to begin the season. So that means we should be interested in Brian Robinson primarily here in this backfield for DraftKings and FanDuel tournaments because we expect Robinson to have most of the early down work and touches. Antonio Gibson is obviously in play as well. These two guys priced fairly similarly on both DraftKings and FanDuel. I would lean towards the Brian Robinson side here if you're looking for a positive game script running back. Would expect Robinson to get a lot of the carries later in the game as well if Washington is in fact taking care of business. Going back to the Ravens really quickly, obviously we have J.K. Dobbins. He ended his holdout. He's going to be available to play here in Week 1. And we expect Gus Edwards to be the other running back behind him in a 1-2 tandem here for the Ravens. But these are not your same old Ravens. We have Todd Monken as the offensive coordinator for Baltimore now. If you're uninitiated as to who Todd Monken is, first of all, why? Second of all, he was the offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers back in 2019 when Jameis Winston threw for over 5,000 passing yards, supported really monster seasons for both Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. So we're expecting a pretty monstrous change in the Ravens play calling towards the passing game. That could benefit these running backs in the passing game, but we're more interested in pass catchers in Baltimore, especially considering there's not likely to be a clear lead back in Baltimore. So even though Baltimore is favored by a large amount this week, we prefer Jackson, we prefer some of the pass catchers there. So the Ravens are favored by 10. The Washington Commanders are favored by 7.5. The next biggest favorite on the board in Week 1 is the Minnesota Vikings hosting the new look Tampa Bay Buccaneers led by Baker Mayfield. Dalvin Cook no longer a Minnesota Viking, so Alexander Mattison is going to be the lead back here for Minnesota. Minnesota favored by 6 points. We think Madison's in line to see the majority of the work at running back, so that would make him very interesting to play here in Week 1. Also favored by 6 points, the Seattle Seahawks in their matchup with the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams may not have Cooper Kupp. Ken Walker was banged up a little bit in the preseason, but has been practicing, is listed as the number 1 running back once again here on the Seahawks depth chart. I think as the season marches on here, we will see rookie Zach Charbonnet carve out a role, but as of now, we cannot expect anything other than Ken Walker to be the guy who leads this backfield. Seattle favored by a touchdown, another modestly priced running back here on DraftKings in a pretty good potential spot to kick off the season. Finally, favored by just 4.5 points here on the road against Anthony Richardson and the Indianapolis Colts, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars and Travis Etienne, one of the more expensive running backs we've looked at in this section of the show here. He will be an interesting player to watch as the season starts here because we're really interested in what Tank Bigsby, their rookie running back, is going to do behind him. There's some speculation that he may have some work in the red zone that might take away from Etienne's upside, so we're going to want to evaluate that here in week one. But the big picture here for week one is that Jacksonville is slated to be in a positive game script environment, so that's good for mostly Travis Etienne here. I don't think Tank Bigsby is someone that we're going to be playing here in week one DFS. The highest total games on the board. These are the games that we typically look at for building our high-risk game stacks for tournaments like the Millionaire Maker here on DraftKings. Far and away in the 4 o'clock window, we have the Dolphins and the Chargers, a 50.5 point total game. And the favored Chargers here are the home side. So, Justin Herbert, Tua Tagovailoa, both excellent tournament quarterback options to build some game stacks with. Pair them with some of your favorite wide receivers on each side. And we know that that's going to be that way because we can also back that up by looking at the early rankings in the Occupy model. Led the show talking about Lamar Jackson. Jalen Hurts is our number one quarterback in his matchup with the New England Patriots. But both inside the top 5 here in the Occupy model. Tua, quarterback number 3 right now here on Thursday afternoon. And Justin Herbert, quarterback number 5. The second highest total on the board is Cleveland and Cincinnati in the 1 p.m. window. Joe Burrow is back at practice. We're expecting Burrow to have no real limitations as far as the passing game is concerned. So he is definitely going to be an interesting play here. And the other quarterback inside the top 5 here is his opponent, Deshaun Watson, in our model. Mentioned that Jalen Hurts is the number one quarterback in the Occupy model. He is slightly cheaper than Lamar Jackson. I will tell you that my concern here with Jalen Hurts is that the Patriots passing defense, we're going off of 2022 data, which isn't extremely valid here to begin the season, but it's really the best thing we have to try to make some decisions. And the Patriots were the 3rd best defense defending quarterbacks in the passing game last year. We know a lot of Jalen Hurts' production is going to come on the ground, but we also know that we have that opportunity with Lamar Jackson, and we think Lamar Jackson is in a slightly better matchup here against the Houston Texans defense, which was well below average defending quarterbacks in 2022. We expect that to continue here in 2023. So if I was building a low-risk lineup here in week one, Lamar Jackson would be my favorite option. Obviously, the quarterbacks that are ranked highly in the model in the Cleveland-Cincinnati games, the Miami and Los Angeles Charger games are very, very viable for game stacks. But there is one other quarterback I'm super interested in playing. He is inside, well, he's actually the number 1 ranked quarterback in my own projections for week one here, and that is rookie Colts quarterback Anthony Richardson. We know that he was the most dynamic prospect at the quarterback position to enter the NFL draft, basically since combine metrics have started to be tracked. That's just how strong the upside here is with the number 4 overall pick, Anthony Richardson. This game is a pretty low total in betting markets, so obviously this is a super high-risk take. I don't think we need to pay down a quarterback in low-risk contests with Richardson, but given his rushing upside and given the chance that he's probably going to be in a negative game script that's going to force him to throw a bit more downfield, I think Anthony Richardson has one of the strongest upside cases, not just this week, but every single week in the NFL. I'm looking forward to the start of this quarterback's career, and I know that I will have him in a few of my tournament lineups here to begin the 2023 NFL season. Top running back plays in the Occupy model. There's 2 ways to really look at this. The first thing that I always like to look at when I'm looking at our model are the top plays by projected ownership. We've got Jamal Williams of the New Orleans Saints as the number 1 projected ownership play here in week one as of Thursday afternoon. And that's largely because of injuries at the position with the New Orleans Saints. We have Alvin Kamara suspended for the first 3 games. Kendre Miller was banged up late in the preseason. Eno Benjamin on IR. Merriweather is out. Vargas is a fullback. Prentice is a fullback. Like, these guys are not relevant down here. It's going to be Jamal Williams getting virtually all of the touches here for the New Orleans Saints in week one against the Tennessee Titans. And this was a pretty tough rush defense in 2022. Titans were actually the second best rush defense in 2022. But volume is the name of the game here at running back every single week. Also here in week one. At just $5,100 here on DraftKings, Jamal Williams probably going to be one of the most popular plays on the board, and I would probably just use him in low risk. In low-risk contests, we want to typically match the field with two of our running backs because that's typically the way those contests tend to shake out, is the highest-owned running backs, typically the best plays to have in your lineups. Jamal Williams, early favorite to be one of those guys here in Week 1. Hell of a picture here on DraftKings as well. Behind Jamal Williams, we have a couple of guys that you all recognize year in and year out. Christian McCaffrey from the 49ers, Austin Eckler from the Los Angeles Chargers. Eckler in one of our favorite game stacks on the board here in Week 1. These guys are super expensive. I'm not really into expensive running backs here in Week 1, and I'll get to that at the end of the video and explain why, specifically for GPPs here. But Ken Walker from the Seattle Seahawks, third by projected ownership for us right now. Deion Jackson, just $4,100 for the Colts. They are underdogs here against the Jaguars, but Jonathan Taylor is on the PUP list. Zach Moss questionable to play. As of right now, we expect Deion Jackson to be the starter here. He's just $4,100 here on DraftKings and $5,600 over on FanDuel. So Deion Jackson's probably going to be another play that's very popular in low-risk contests especially. I think I would lean towards playing Ken Walker against the Rams, though, because of basically all of the reasons we talked about at the top of the show. Should be getting the majority of the touches to start the game. He's home. He's favored by almost a touchdown. Really good spot here for Ken Walker. These are probably the best low-risk running backs based off of the consensus of information that we know about week in and week out that we can rely on. Friday final injury report update here that we've been keeping an eye on. Ken Walker, still love him in low risk with Seattle favored, looking for positive game scripts here, but questionable with a groin injury after being limited in practice on Thursday. When we look at Seattle's depth chart, it's actually DJ Dallas, who is officially listed as the backup to Ken Walker III. So keep an eye on this as we get closer to Sunday. We'll have information posted in the Daily Plug that will confirm what we think is the best play here. But if Ken Walker does in fact miss this game, we are looking at close to minimum price DJ Dallas with another fantastic picture like Jamal Williams, and second round draft pick Zach Charbonnet. We'll see how the Seattle Seahawks organize their pecking order here, but right now on the depth chart, it is Dallas and then Charbonnet behind Walker, if that's a decision that we have to make. Now, our model has a little bit of a differentiation with projected ownership with top plays at running back. Week 1 is a very, very good tournament week. Outcome is going to be pretty volatile here. We like Nick Chubb best in the model right now. Derrick Henry behind him. Two expensive running backs. I'm not super into them in tournaments. Najee Harris, kind of interesting, $6,100, slight underdog against the 49ers. Bijan Robinson making his debut for the Falcons, also in that expensive tier, so I'm not as interested in him here in Week 1. Talked about him right off the top. Brian Robinson, the Washington Commanders favored by over a touchdown, 7.5 points against the Arizona Cardinals this week. Same price point as Jamal Williams. I do think that Brian Robinson makes sense as a direct pivot off of Jamal Williams in tournaments this week, but you could certainly play both Robinson and Jamal Williams together and have a couple of cheap running backs in your lineup. The wide receiver position. I love jamming target hogs in Week 1, particularly when we have plenty of salary flexibility. The top wide receivers in the Occupy model overall this week, they're the usual suspects. We have Tyreek Hill actually ahead of Justin Jefferson, both here at the top of the salary table. I think either is fine. I think playing two of these elite wide receivers is doable if you can find the salary elsewhere. We also like Christian Kirk with the Jacksonville Jaguars in that game against the Colts here in Week 1. We have Jamar Chase ranked super highly in the Occupy model at the top of the salary tier. And we also have New Orleans' Chris Olave as one of the better plays on the board, and a pretty low price for a true wide receiver one that should see 10 plus targets here in Week 1, just $6,500 here on DraftKings and just $7,300 over on FanDuel. This group of wide receivers, the way I have the model sorted here, is by the highest projected targets in Week 1. So Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and Tyreek Hill are the guys that we think will see 10 plus targets. We've got Adams at 9, Brown and Olave at close to 9, between 8 and 9. So this is how I kind of like to look at wide receiver plays. I'm mainly a DraftKings player, so I'm going to be looking at wide receivers that are priced at $5,000 or less. For you FanDuel players, that's pretty close to the $6,000 or less tier. And the best plays as far as target share in Week 1 in this modest salary range, we got Jahan Dotson with the Commanders, Zay Flowers, and Nico Collins, both from that Baltimore Ravens and Houston Texans game. So that's another interesting data point that suggests stacking Lamar Jackson a little bit might be in play. We got George Pickens from the Pittsburgh Steelers, and we have Brandon Ayuk from the San Francisco 49ers. If you're truly dumpster diving as far as salary is concerned, Marvin Mims is going to be starting in 2 wide receiver sets for the Denver Broncos. Just $3,000 here on DraftKings, $4,700 over on FanDuel, and we project Mims for over 5 targets here. Hard to argue with that kind of volume at the absolute minimum price at wide receiver. I think Marvin Mims will end up being decently owned for a cheap wide receiver on this slate. It's hard to really forecast the cheap guys because there's a lot of different directions that you can go with plays here in week 1 because salary's been out for over a month and things are kind of soft, to be honest with you. But Marvin Mims, will slot him in here just as a placeholder for a low-risk lineup to show you what we can do with the amount of salary that is available to us. At the tight end position, speaking of cheap plays, we're going to see a lot of people probably flock to Luke Musgrave here for the Green Bay Packers. Musgrave is going to be the clear every down tight end out there with Jordan Love, and there have been some issues at wide receiver in practice this week with both Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson for the Packers. So it should be a heavy dose of the rookies Luke Musgrave and Jaden Reed at wide receiver. Musgrave going to be one of the better plays at tight end that you can consider if you're punting the position and not looking to play a lot. Just $2,900 here. And he's affordable over on FanDuel as well. Personally, I'm trying to play Lamar Jackson. I'm trying to get one of these expensive wide receivers in here. And at defense, the field is flocking to the Commanders against the Arizona Cardinals here in week 1. You have $7,450 to finish off a DraftKings low-risk lineup here, or maybe even a tournament lineup if you want to add in a couple of pass catchers in the Houston and Baltimore game to polish this off. It's really, really easy to land on a lineup that you feel good about here in week 1. So looking at just a couple of these cheap plays and how they really open the board for you, really, really interesting here for sure. We like to talk about game stacks here at Occupy week in and week out. We have our favorite game stacks every single week highlighted in the Daily Plug. I talk about them in these weekly preview videos. This particular week, with how big the tournaments are on DraftKings and FanDuel, with like hundreds of thousands of entrants, the $5 Millionaire on DraftKings has literally over 1 million entry slots available to users. There's been a little bit of a shift in what winning lineups look like in those contests. I'm going to look at the last 3 times that they've run it, and we'll look at the winners and some of the macro trends that we can extract from them. Here's 2022's winning lineup. We have a Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce stack with no bring back from the Arizona side. We have 4 wide receivers, a cheap defense, and we have 2 modestly priced running backs in here, $6,100 or less here on DraftKings. Not super popular, both under 15%, one under 10%. That's the 2022 winner for $1 million for Rapid Fire XD here. 2021, we had a Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Joe Mixon 3-0 stack with nobody on the Minnesota side coming back. Once again, we had 4 wide receivers, wide receiver on the flex, 2 running backs modestly priced, $6,200 or less, both under 15% owned, 1 super low owned, just 4% with Melvin Gordon from the Denver Broncos that year. Low owned defense, just 1% and cheap as well. The 2020 $5 Millionaire winner was our favorite type of stack for large field GPPs, a 3-1 game stack between the Packers and the Minnesota Vikings with a low owned defense, the minimum price, just 7.9%, with 2 modestly priced running backs, $6,800 or less, and wide receiver in the flex. The formula in week 1, it seems to be wide receiver in the flex, cheap defense, at least 1 running back that is modestly priced and under 10%. This was the 1 year and the 3-year sample here where we had a relatively popular 25+% owned running back hit the winning lineup with Josh Jacobs. But even given that, I think there's room for 2 low-owned, modestly priced plays in your lineups this year. So if we know that Jamal Williams is going to be the most popular running back here in week 1, makes Brian Robinson, in my opinion, one of the best plays that you can have in your lineup for the week 1 millionaire maker. Ownership should be at a fraction of Jamal Williams's in a much better game script environment with Washington favored by over a touchdown. Brian Robinson Jr., one of my favorite overall plays on the week 1 slate for this reason alone. The other big thing I'm being extremely conscious of going into building week 1 tournament lineups is the lack of a bringback in recent winners in this giant lottery-style tournament. No bringback last year with the Mahomes-Kelce 2-0. No bringback 2 years ago with the Burrow-Higgins Mixon 3-0 that won the Millionaire Maker in 2021. What this tells us is that we need to open up our rules a little bit and not be so hyper-focused on just game stack environments, 3-0s, 3-1s. We need to be willing to consider the 2-0s, the 3 O's with running backs added on, and see if we can land on a winning combination in this contest. Beyond that, my key takeaway is going to be not to focus on forcing the bring back in my stacks. We have 2 years in a row in this giant $5 lottery where there was no bring back required to get there because there's so many good plays that are available to fill out a lineup. We still want the quarterback pass catcher correlation, definitely. We've seen that every single year, but we don't have to go as heavy with it in week 1 because we have some stale pricing that we can take advantage of. Who are some of your favorite plays here in week 1 DFS? Leave a comment on the video below with some players that you're looking forward to playing here to kick off the season. Give us a thumbs up on the video. We'd like to see as many thumbs up on these as possible to know that you guys are enjoying this content and that you want to see more of it throughout the rest of the 2023 NFL regular season. I know I will be back next week to talk more about the week 2 main slate. Expect some videos on the channel for some of the showdown slates between now and then, and I look forward to talking to you next time. Good luck in week 1, folks.